All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to see everybody here tonight, early evening here, and welcome everyone to the start of the 2021 Gifted Education Policy Symposium and Conference, or at least the pre-conference portion of this. Um, Tonight, this early evening, I'm so honored to be here with some wonderful parents that have decided to join us for an important conversation that we're going to have here together. My name is Ryan Mcclintock. It's absolutely my honor to serve as moderator of this conversation to ask some questions and um, and kind of just it really engage us in this conversation. It's going to be a tight 55 minutes here because I just know there's going to be so many wonderful stories and thoughts shared from our panelists. Um, I am an administrator, a professional learning specialist, and a facilitator of gifted education at the high school level. Our agenda for tonight. In a moment, I will be introducing you all to our panelists who have, again, just committed their time and energy and effort on behalf of gifted education and the idea of representation and disproportionality in gifted education. Our presentation tonight will follow the asking of 4 questions. All of our panelists will have time to answer um, uh, their answers to the question, and we'll kind of just be going through those 4 questions and see what trouble we can get into with these answers. And if there's time permitting, questions might be coming in from everybody here that's kind of tuned in. Towards the end, I will be transitioning us to the policy symposium starting at 5:30 tonight. Our main purpose and the tone of tonight, and essentially from Shimamanda Ngozi Adichie says this: stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. In this panel discussion, we seek diverse perspective tonight. We seek stories, we seek experiences, and we hope to learn from these perspectives and stories to break down cliches and stereotypes and to call us and move us to action. Sorry about that. Introductions, our wonderful panelist. Here we have Shalila Dillard. She's a gifted student who advocates for marginalized gifted students with her nonprofit SCD enrichment program. She's also a proud wife and mother of 2 boys, one being twice exceptional, and she's an artist at heart. Thank you for being here tonight, Shalila. And then Elena Henry is co-chair of the Colorado Gifted Education State Advisory Committee. She's the mother of 5 children under 10 years and is very busy on various stages of their respective gifted identification. Thank you for being here. Ching Hua is founder and CEO of Build a Robot K-12 and is a mother of a highly sensitive and gifted middle schooler and a 4th grader who loves STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. Tracy Ferguson is also with us. Tracy's a Jeffco School's gifted and talented social emotional learning specialist, mother of Chelsea, a creative and passionate underidentified twice exceptional learner. And about Chelsea, Chelsea is a high school junior. She excels in the arts, including drawing, theater, and singing, just to name a few. And Rosa Medina is a GT advisor of a Title I bilingual school and a parent of 2 young adults with completely different profiles. One is an autonomous learner pursuing a degree in physics, and the other a visual spatial thinker interested in doing concept art as a career. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here tonight and for, again, committing your time and energy to this wonderful discussion. We have 4 questions, as I mentioned, that we'll be going through here. And each panelist has had time to kind of just think through and maybe prepare a 2-minute kind of response to each of these particular questions. Maybe an opportunity for some follow-up along the way. and some Q&A from everybody in attendance. Our four guiding questions tonight are, what does giftedness mean to you? And how is this reflected in your child's story, your child's journey? How do you advocate for equitable gifted education programming for your child and or for other children? And what hopes and apprehensions do you have for gifted students as they navigate our current society? And then fourth question is, what is your call to action for the field of gifted education? And so to kind of get us going here with this conversation, I think we'll go in order of order of introduction. So beginning with Shalila, and then Elena, Ching, Tracy, and Chelsea, and Rosa. And so Shalila, first question to you. What does giftedness mean to you? And how is this reflected in your child's story or journey?
So, being gifted means everything to me. I was identified as gifted in the first grade and went through gifted education all the way through to being in high school, advanced placement classes, and honors classes. So it has definitely been a part of my identity, even if I didn't realize it was a part of my identity, especially in elementary school, where I was like, I don't know, I'm just going to these classes. But it was super apparent to me that I was in gifted education because I was definitely like alienated from my peers in middle school and high school. So I've had some definite trauma with being realizing that I was gifted, and that alienation that sometimes happens when you are gifted. For my son, who I literally just like last month realized that he was a twice exceptional child. It was an interesting journey for him because through preschool, through kindergarten, and now he's in first grade, all his teachers were like, he is so amazing, he's so high level, but it never reflected on like his any of his written work. And I was concerned as a mom, like, and as a former teacher of 11 years, to say like, he's not where he's supposed to be academically. And they would just give me like, oh no, he's just so amazing, he's so great. And it had me definitely like start using the advocacy tools that I do for my program with my own son. And that was like it was a complete shift for me because it was real life now. Like, okay, I truly do have to advocate for my son. So
Yeah. Oh,
it's been a journey.
yeah. Thank you so much for kicking us off there and sharing that information. Elena, how about you? Same question to you.
Giftedness is so broad. So let me state from personal experience what it is not. It is not elitism, high test scores, easy learning across all subjects, or being an independent learner. It is a mixed bag of blessings, including needing fewer repetitions, an advanced way of looking at the world in comparison with your peers, asynchronous development, existential crises, and a strong drive for perfectionism coupled with inevitable procrastination. I'm sure there's a few people watching that can probably relate with that.
All right. Ching, you want to tackle that question?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think Elena said it so well. So for me, gifted or talented is exactly what it means, is that kids could be very talented in some fields. It could be academics or creativity. At the same time, being also a mom of a kid who's super sensitive. So a very early recognition of the gifted is also the need to support them emotionally and then just really understand how they feel. When it comes to my son, he's allergic to many food, noises, and all these kind of stuff. So I know a lot of times we talk about academics, but I also feel like it's so important to be able to connect with these kids emotionally before we discuss about academics.
Thank you. Tracy, Chelsea, together, separate, however you want to kind of add.
Whatever works. I had a similar experience to Shalala. Was moved from a math class in first grade and had to go to a different class and didn't quite understand why. And as an educator, we had colored portfolios that we kept for kids that supposedly had these gifted plans, but for a long time we didn't do anything about it. And then becoming a mom, I have a kiddo who struggled with math and avoided math. She was in a Montessori school, and the teachers would talk about her drawing on her assignments, or I would come home and she would be missing socks or gloves, and she had turned them into dolls and or clothes for her dolls and other creations. Highly sensitive to certain foods and some allergies. And fast forward now, she's a junior in high school and she can speak to this, but was never identified as twice exceptional. And now as a junior, I'm realizing, you know, we missed that part to best meet her needs. And you can speak to kind of your journey.
Okay. Well, what being gifted to me means is, well, I didn't even know I was gifted for a long time. But what it means to me now is just to think a little differently than other people. And I may not be great at math, but I know I'm really good creatively, and that's just where I'm personally gifted. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Rosa?
For me, giftedness means having high intellectual ability, which is not necessarily expressed as high academic achievement or school performance, and many have said. And it usually comes together with high emotional sensitivity and intensity. And this emotional aspect is, in my opinion, the most challenging for parents and teachers to understand and manage. And from my journey as a parent, I learned that if children are not intellectually challenged, that could affect them physically and emotionally. For example, my oldest son, he started having frequent stomach aches and a lot of anxiety when he started school, when he was an outgoing kid before and never suffered from these things. So, but because he was very outspoken, it was easy for me to know when his needs were not met, so I could advocate for him in school. His brother, on the other side, is very quiet and introvert, and he didn't care if he wasn't challenged academically, so he never complained. But it was in high school when he struggled the most with low motivation, lack of interest, and a paralyzing perfectionism. As Elena said, like lots of procrastination. He started failing school, failing classes when he used to be like a top A student. And so it was puzzling, right? And from my years working as a GT advisor, I have also learned that that there are many groups of gifted children not being formally identified. And since the topic of this conference is disproportionality in identification, I want to recommend watching the clips from the G Word movie. I don't know if you're aware of this movie in the making that will be published will be out in 2022 next year. And I think this movie does a great job showing these different groups of kids from different economic, cultural, and gender identification, like kids that are gender diverse also, who are not usually identified in gifted programs because they're different and people don't pay attention to them many times. So I think it's important to recognize that these kids are the hardest to identify. Yeah, and we need to pay attention to them.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody want to kind of expand a little bit more on someone Rosa just kind of brought into, especially with the movie reference that's coming out in 2022? Anybody have any thoughts on that, or kind of what she introduced towards the end of her comment as a follow-up? Anyone want to jump in?
I just want to add if people want to check the movie clips, I'm putting the link in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see it or not, but I'll put it here for future reference. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Elena, you look like you may have something to say. Do you?
Not. I just really resonated with what you were saying. You know, just how you know, personally, like when I was a gifted student in high school, I had kind of a setback in elementary school. So I went from one district to another, and my teacher was the gatekeeper to identification process. And so she said, well, you may have been gifted in that district, but here, this is like the elite district. I'm not going to name it, but you know, this is the elite district of this city, and you're not gifted here. And she put me in the English language learners class, or it was ESL at the time, because my family is bilingual. And so, you know, she said, you know, and I passed all of that as well, but I felt like, oh, maybe I'm actually not good enough, because that perfectionism and that anxiety and that intensity comes in even with fourth graders, you know. And so it's like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. And so that kind of sent me on this spiral, because I was completing reports and she was giving me D's and F's and saying, you know, I didn't know at the time, but she thought my parent completed the work. And so, you know, I thought, I'm just really not gifted here. I'm not smart. I don't know what, you know, who built me up in this other district to make me think that I knew more than I did. And I kind of self-sabotaged, and the procrastination was an issue. And I was, you know, intentionally getting D's and F's in my sophomore year of high school. That coupled with some other emotional things going on. And so just, I completely resonate with what you were saying, Rosa, about how, you know, that procrastination that was once an A student now is, you know, on the verge of failing classes or not doing as well. And so that just struck an emotional chord for me. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And can I may have missed it, but did you say, or are you willing to say, did you grow up in Colorado?
Yes, yeah, in Colorado
Okay.
Springs.
Okay, all right. And anything else on that thought, or anything that Elena just brought up? Anyone? You're welcome to kind of bring it up in any of your future responses. I am going to kind of mention a little bit about advocacy, tying us into our second question. I'm going to give Shalila an opportunity here before kind of reading the second question. You had mentioned in your first response the idea of using your skills and your knowledge around the idea of advocacy for I believe your own son, right? Is there anything you want to expand on with that, or in terms of like, how did you find yourself doing that? What types of skills were you using with your son? To give you an option to, if you want to expand on that. Otherwise, we'll go ahead into the second question about advocacy.
I'm glad that you asked that question, because for me, it was an eye-opening event. Once I realized, oh, twice exceptional, I had an array of tools and you know, resources that I could you know, glean from working in gifted education for, you know, over 3 years now. And so it was easier for me because I have those tools. So now we have to look at the parents who, you know, are not in gifted education and don't quite know how to advocate, because it can be frustrating. Like for my husband, for example, he's not an educator. You know, he is not allowed around the kids when they're learning, because that's just not his mode. And you know, we both found ourselves like really frustrated with the teachers. Like, we see that he has a problem at home, that he is not like learning his letters and he's in kindergarten. Like, this is an issue, but you keep on like highlighting him and saying how amazing he is, because you know, they saw the giftedness in other areas that are very visible. Like he is like he absolutely can build anything out of everything. He's super articulate, has been articulate since like he was months old. And so, you know, it was like those higher abilities that everyone was seeing, and they weren't seeing the other part. And I feel like I was just, so we actually didn't listen to his schools and put him in tutoring on Saturdays, and actually with an educator who specifically works for African American children, and helping with that talent development part, on helping with that like identification process of giftedness. And we just happened to find her, and he was going every Saturday, and it was like, it absolutely helped him. So
Yeah, thank you. I'm really thankful for that. Just your expertise and your ability to make that connection. And in my own mind, just kind of connecting that with what Elena shared about herself growing up too, especially in high school, and essentially what expertise she wasn't essentially exposed to. I'm going to go ahead and read the second question here, and then I think we'll stay in the same order. So still with you, Shalila, how do you advocate for equitable gifted education programming for your child and maybe any other children?
So I'll definitely, since it's so new with my little baby, I'll definitely talk about how I advocate for other students. And so, out of my lived experiences, I'll kind of like go backwards a little. So I went to one of the most diverse high schools in Denver. But when you walked into the advanced classes or honors classes, it was uh, very white, and I was the only Black female person in all of those classes, all 4 years. There was another Black male,
4 years.
and then there was a male and female Latino, and then that was it. That's all you're getting for all 4 years. And so for me, that lived experience being so isolated from my actual friends outside of those courses, where when I was in the hallway or at lunch or like in gym, I was hanging out with, people of color, and that was where I felt so comfortable. But, then having to go back to class after gym or after lunch, and having to be into an environment which was actually very isolating. And, of course, there were like microaggressions all the time, everywhere. I was the Black representative all the time for all Black questions, and it was exhausting. And that paired with my teaching experience, and I actually was a gifted and talented and SPED teacher my very first year of teaching. As a 22-year-old teaching in high school, it was intense, but I saw so many of my students in special education that should have been in gifted and talented. And I just like was out and just asked them, like, why are you in here? Because you clearly need to be in the gifted and talented, program. And, one student was like, well, I was really bad in elementary school, and so he had like oppositional defiant disorder. That's what they, labeled him as. And so, and no one took the time to take me out. So I've just been riding the coast and didn't really know how to do it. But was like one of my top students actually that I've ever had. And so, it's those unfortunate stories like that kind of led me to really seeing over the years, like, I know where we are. I know where all the gifted and talented students are. They're in the general education classes and they're in special education. No. So, it was within me to create this program off of those experiences. And advocating looks several different ways. Advocating looks like doing equity work within schools with my program. So this year, I'm actually an equity coach, a consultant equity coach for a school in Arvada. And, realizing that if the foundation of the school is not inequitable, is inequitable, then how can it serve and identify more students of color for gifted and talented? It's not going to where it's going to be stories like Atlanta's, where it's just like it's doing the opposite effect, and really just not giving the opportunity that should be there. It also looks like we offer a summer camp over the summer, and that is for all students in middle school and high school, and those are always super fun because we have an ethnic history part associated with that. And then we have school programming. And so like all year round, I'm advocating for students of color, making sure that they have a body of evidence, that they're not just going off of test scores, super important. And really, holding our teachers and our admin accountable for the body of evidence and other modes of like identifying students. Like, stop just doing the testing. Stop it. it's clearly not working. So stop. Let's look at different strategies. Let's look at the talent development part and all that. So
Oh, well, thank you. Now working within the lines of what of what our legislation says in terms of the body of evidence, and not slipping to just some test scores there. Thank you, Elena. We're back with you, and something tells me you're ready to go.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so as the eldest child usually is, ours was our test baby into public education, and just how difficult it is to be a gifted bilingual Hispanic and Native American student on the free lunch program, right? So I wasn't proactive very early on into her education because I had no idea. I wasn't seeking out the gifted coordinator. I wasn't seeking out the resources that were available at the school. I don't know why. I just like assumed that somebody was going to come to me and be like, hey, your child fits all of these boxes. So here's like our menu of services. I mean, I know that's crazy, but that's just like what I thought was going to happen. And so within a few months, like her kindergarten teacher was like, hey, I'm differentiating for her quite a bit. I'm actually going to be placing her in higher classes. And my eldest daughter's name is Sienna. So if you hear me refer to her, that's who I'm talking about. And so I started, once I heard that, I started digging more into the programs and the resources offered by her school district, and like the community, and realized just how much support she was eligible for. Because of this, I started really early for my other kids. I was elected to policy council, the program development committee, the board of directors for their nonprofit preschool. I was elected to be the parent representative for my congressional district through the Gifted Education State Advisory Committee, and I am now the co-chair of that committee. I take an active role in coaching their sports, in the PTA, and working in their classrooms, and in the Title VI Native American Alliance program in their district. Although I am a self-proclaimed introvert, I just insert myself into these positions where I'm around people all the time, around students and their parents, just so that I can maybe give a voice to other gifted students with similar backgrounds as my children.
So kind of a journey, or just like a quantum leap from almost kind of like waiting to hear what options were available to just a leap into really getting involved and educating yourself and just getting plugged in. And I know Lauralee in the chat earlier mentioned the idea of her parents almost feeling like a helicopter in terms of them kind of getting involved, and that might come up in some of the future responses in terms of that perception and what of it. Ching, I think it's to you now.
Gosh, you guys do amazing work. So for me, I feel like it's been a learning journey. So when my son was identified as a gifted kid, I think when he was 2nd or 3rd grade, I just got the email from the school that there's a coffee chat, and then like parents and teachers get together. I think one GT teacher. The first thing was we didn't have funding. And I didn't quite understand what at the time, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, what the funding is for. But I volunteered to do a survey to have a better understanding of why do we need funding, where we're going to use the funding. And then so that survey really educated me. It seems like kids are so different. Some kids wanted to do, art program, others wanted to do chess or math, like more of that. So it's a wide variety of it. So we actually took it to the school at the time, wanting to implement these programs and see if we can self-fund it. At the time, we had a leadership change, so just didn't seem like it could go anywhere. And actually, I had a mom said, I have 3 kids from this school, gifted kids. It's really hard to implement a program. So if you want to, really make a difference, maybe use your energy somewhere else. And that's actually what I did. So my kid at the time was really interested in coding, and I want him to do more hands-on stuff, or he wanted to do more hands-on stuff. So we ended up starting a robotics club at our house. Most of the kids he's gifted, kids who are interested in this, and then parents also came and joined. So we did that for 2 years. Really fun. And then that's another thing that, again, another opportunity for me is I see these kids, besides my own son, who's very emotional when it comes to learning, right? Becoming impatient or so super excited. So I think that just watching all these other kids just reinforce my belief on social emotional support is so critical. So when we kind of like more parents wanted to join and we can really hold more kids, so I reach out to an after school program to see if I can take that, work with that after school program so that we can accommodate more kids. So my journey has been, I think, first try to help my kid or his friends, and then really just to take what we have learned and see how we can actually just help other parents or other educators to actually help their kids as well. So the other thing I did is, with Elena and also Shashila, is like I also volunteer at the GEPSC committee, and then really for me it was like learning what's going on and also sharing the lessons or our journey. So from an advocating perspective, I guess I call myself the advocating for social emotional support for our gifted kids, because I feel like if we cannot connect with them, we can help them in other ways. And then also I feel like, again, along this journey, it started with like this small tiny piece of my kids to other kids, and now it's really about building a better world together, right? So like I see gifted kids has so much potential, right? So a lot of times I see that as not supporting is the opportunity lost for us as society. So with that, we really do need to, reach out to more kids. And most recently, I think with GEPSC, we talk about how we can reach out to rural kids, right? Now as everything is virtual, does that actually give us better vehicle to reach out to more kids?
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Tracy? Chelsea, Tracy?
Yeah, so everybody sort of touched on similar stories. I've been a school counselor for a very long time, and I think back to so many kids that were in my office, and I would advocate for them just being an advocate for kids, but looking back and now being part of the GT community and having experience like at the district special education school, recognizing that those kids, we channeled them in one direction and we missed that GT piece. And so many of them had those strengths that we weren't addressing. And so now fast forwarding to being a parent and being part of the GT community, my mind's blown. I've had to learn also as a parent where to go to advocate for my kid, even though I am an educator. And so that means connecting with different groups to find out how best to advocate for a child who's thrice exceptional, if you will. And so educating myself more and really helping her learn how to advocate for herself as she, is completing her junior year, and being able to find places that will tap into her talents and acknowledge that whole child. Do you want to speak to a little bit of that?
Sure. So I'm not really big in the advocation piece, but I in middle school was placed in special education math classes, which this was before we knew about my math disability diagnosis. And I was the only Black girl. I was the only Black kid, period. And I remember my teacher always being like, "You're not trying hard enough. You just don't care. All you do is draw." And I was like, "Well, I don't understand." And that was before I even knew how severe my disability was. But I just remember constantly feeling put down and being like, "Well, you're not good enough. You're never going to be good enough." So that's just how I feel about being in like special education and being gifted, is that they never acknowledged the good things about my grades or the good things that I was doing at school. They were just always like,
And I think recognizing that students learn differently. And so when she was able to take a math class and use her drawing or some of her, skills of how her brain worked, she did well. And so I think that advocacy piece for me, both as a parent and as a professional, has just skyrocketed, because I see the need for our kids to be able to, not just in gifted classes, because I think the gifted educators do a lot of that differentiation, but educating all teachers and all staff around how students learn and what best practices are to support students learning as a whole.
Thank you. I don't know if I froze up here, or someone else. There's a little bit of a blurb there. I just want to point out that the comments, there's some wonderful comments coming in here from Dr. G and David Berg. Was almost like typing in at the same time. You guys were talking about the same, like navigating the school system. I just want to see if you guys have a chance to take a look at those comments. Rosa, you wanna chime in here?
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that it is really hard to advocate as a parent, especially if your child is not performing in a school. Like I could compare, like my oldest child always excelled, so it was very easy, kind of, not so easy, but it was easy. I was confident to go to school and say, hey, please, let's do something. He needs more, right? He needs something different. And it felt okay, to advocate in that way. Sometimes I found some resistance when it was obvious that my kid needed something different. For example, like a very easy example to understand is like he was taking Spanish, and we are bilingual, and he's fluent in Spanish, and he had to learn dog, cat, like vocabulary. It's very simple vocabulary when he could talk in Spanish fluently. So that was obvious, and I found resistance. And that's what I found and figured out, oh my God, like if I'm struggling to advocate and I have a master's in education and I'm very bilingual, so how difficult this could be for an immigrant family who is not confident about their language skills, or they don't have like a formal education, right? So I thought, if it's hard for me, it must be horrible for another parent to do this on their own, right? Because it's scary. Like I myself was intimidated and I didn't want to do that, but I needed to do it. So that's when I started getting involved in organizations in the community. I contacted Boulder Valley Gifted and Talented, and then I got connected to the Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented. And I think that it's very important to have advocates in schools, because when my youngest child started struggling in school, I felt like, oh my God, how can I advocate for him if he's not performing, right? If he's not getting A's. But it was clear that he was in the 99 percentile on the SAT and all of that, but he was failing all the classes. But still, like if he was not turning homework in, or if he was not doing what he's supposed to do, it's really hard to advocate, because what are my tools, right? What do I say to the teacher? But if you have someone who understands giftedness and who gets how underachievement works in gifted children, so they could help you. Like parents need someone to talk to who gets them, because it's very emotional for us to see our kids failing when we know they are totally capable, but there's something going on emotionally, right, that it's interfering. So if you go to school and people don't believe what you're saying, or they say, your child is lazy or whatever, you feel horrible, and then you are quiet, right? But if you find a counselor, a psychologist who gets this, then you're like, oh yeah, if someone understands my struggle, and they are a bridge between you and the teachers, and it's easier, I think, for teachers to listen to a colleague than to listen to a parent sometimes, because they say, oh, this must be the helicopter parent who is pushing their child. Who knows, right? So having an advocate or a counselor or a specialist in the schools is very, very helpful, either for teachers and for families. And as a GT advisor, the way I advocate for equitable education is by spending sometimes extra time trying to find the right test for the kid. Because I thought, when I first started, I thought, oh, all these kids who are bilingual, because I'm bilingual, they're going to score high in this test, right? But then that didn't happen, as Shalila was saying, right? So there's something going on with the tests. Like there definitely must be some cultural bias. or something. So it's great, it's good to have a portfolio. And I think many GT advisors don't have the time to do that. Like I do it because I care about these kids, and even myself, sometimes I feel guilty because I have to do all these other things, and I, like we are have limited hours in the school, so, and we're asked to do so many things. So it's understandable why children of color or twice exceptional children don't get identified, and they really need our help. So that's one thing, one way to advocate is, in my case, is spending extra time finding the instruments, and also including kids in programming, even if they're not formally identified. If there's that portfolio and the teachers tell me, hey, this kid is capable, this kid should be included, then I'll take them in. And it's easy. Fortunately, in our district, we don't have, like, we can do that. It's not that you have to pass this test to be able to do these classes. No, that's great about my district, that we can do that. And another way, a third way that we can advocate is by building relationships with the families and the students. And I'm so happy to be part of this group called the GT Leaders of Color and Allies, that we're with Shalila are there, and we invite anyone interested in supporting the students of color to join and follow us, because we're getting together to join forces to inform families. I think Shalila has been involved in a couple of family talks for parents of Black students. And I have done one presentation in Spanish for families to tell them what giftedness is, how your kid gets identified, and things like that, that many parents don't know. So that's another way we're advocating. And it's great to be together with other people of color to do this, because we energize each other. Because one person alone, like, you feel discouraged sometimes. You feel like, oh, how do I do this? It's too much work. But if we work together, we feel like we motivate each other, right, to do more. So that's what we're doing so far to advocate for children.
So you you mentioned a lot there, and that was. But a couple things I want to point out is the idea of having a strong advocate within the school, not just for the student but also for the families, to understand that. And then you also talked about, I'm just going to call it the network that you're participating in, and that some of us are. Is that on? Is that a website you might be able to share? Is that in social media? That you might want to kind of put that out there. But the idea of kind of networking and also having a strong advocate within the building is kind of what I heard really prominently there with your wonderful thoughts. I taking a look at the time in the chat and everything, kind of going crazy on my screen here a little bit. I did want to find out if anybody wants to kind of respond or follow up to anything that was said to this particular question. There definitely was a theme also of sensitivities and SPED and twice exceptional. Elena, I saw your hand there. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak from personal experience. And one of the things that I am working really hard and trying to find more of, like, getting my foot in the door in this area as well. Like you were saying, is like talking about children of immigrants, because my grandmother was an immigrant, and my mom was up for the gifted and talented program in their school, and she refused. She was like, this was in the time where, and honestly, we're living in a similar time where people of color are told that you're already taking so much from our country, right? The message that you receive as a person of color is that you're taking our jobs, and you're taking our food, and you're taking our welfare, and you're taking our food stamps, and you're taking all of these things that obviously not everybody that's a person of color is representative of that, but no matter. So it's hard. The immigrants that I've spoken with recently, as well as like my grandmother herself, feel like accepting any other resources from the school is taking too much from other students or from other people in our country, that it feels uncomfortable to say, yes, my child can be in the gifted program, even though you're having a different message from the rest of the world. Your school and the teachers are saying your child is amazing and we want to lift them up and we want to support them and give them everything that they need to succeed in this country. And the other message from almost everywhere else is that you're taking so much from our country that you don't deserve to have the same resources as other students. So, that for me is one huge area that I'm trying to advocate right now. And I've spoken quite a bit in GSEC. I'm sure you've probably heard as well that, that as well as testing people and identifying people in their native language, if that's a possibility to do, because sometimes you may understand how to work out a problem, but if you're like, for example, my family predominantly Spanish speaking, then when you're a kindergartner, you know how to do the math, you understand the problem, but being able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Articulate that in English to where your teacher can understand that you understand the problem can be more challenging as well. So those are just two things I wanted to kind of add to what you were saying, Rosa.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I can tell looking at our panel that there's plenty of thoughts that are kind of percolating up here about that. And I think it kind of nicely leads into the third question. Shalila, what hopes and apprehensions do you have for gifted students as they navigate our current society?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I just want to say thank you for acknowledging our undocumented and immigrant students, Atlanta, because that's huge. And, to speak on the other side of that, when it talks about like the differences in upbringing and cultural values, right? And so like, I know for a lot of like African American families, it's like, you're like back talking an adult, really? Or you better not, like, and that like is a thing where it's like students advocating for themselves is almost looked at as like you're being like defiant and that's not okay. And so it's like also talking about that other point where it's like sometimes advocacy is like it's not a thing of some people's cultures that is accepted for. Whereas, I guess I'm an anomaly because my mom was all up in schools like, no, you're going to get my kids and gifted and talented because that's where so obviously it's not like for like all, people of color, that's how they feel. But, we do have to acknowledge that side of it too. Like sometimes going into schools and demanding things means that you have privilege. And sometimes people of color, especially undocumented people, are really weary on like what privilege they have or if they have any at all, which is most of the time the second part. So thank you for addressing that, Elena. I would say that like my hopes is that we can expand the definition of what gifted is in order to do away with the stigma of like elitism that really Elena was talking about in the very beginning. And another hope is that gifted education classes could look like more representative, obviously, of our nation, because any state that you go into, you will find a gifted and talented program that is very homogeneous to white students. And that's everywhere in the nation. And so it's not just a Colorado thing, it's a national problem. And so we definitely do have to look at like revamping our definitions of gifted and talented. And that's like super important. And we also don't talk about this. Like there are some students who have been identified as gifted and talented that are a person of color, and their parents are like, I'm not putting my kid in that program. Why? For them to be alienated, like I was, and that's why I dropped out of that programming. And so some of it could be like generational trauma from gifted and talented, where we're not having those discussions and we need to have more of. I talked to one parent in particular, and she's like, yeah, I'm not doing it. My kid was identified in third grade, and I just do supplemental stuff for him. And he's good to go, but I'm not doing that because it was super traumatic for me. And I don't want him to have to deal with the microaggressions and inequality within those classes. No thanks. And so we have to look at like it's like a cycle that is perpetuating. So we have to, that goes to my next point, make it to where our gifted programming is not so homogeneous, and just looking at the environments and having equity be a priority for schools, equity be a priority for gifted and talented, and then we'll definitely see some more shifts and where it's supposed to be. Like my apprehension would be, the other part of that question would be that if we don't make that equity shift and it's not a priority, then we're going to be at the same place that we're in. I also really would love to see that more people are talking about those like differences, and that for our students, like it doesn't just look one particular way. And there could be varying identities or varying, like, for example, Chelsea was talking about like how gifted she was talent wise. Like I made these flowers, like I do art all the time. Like that's another part of like my giftedness, that I didn't really see as being gifted. But when my brothers were winning awards for their art, and I was like selling art in high school and things like that, I really realized like, oh, this is like, I'm pretty good at this, and this is another area of my giftedness. So yeah, those are some of the areas where, yeah, no problem.
Kind of taking this question and merging it here with, because it's nicely happening right now with the calls to action. And I'm going to change something here right now. I'm going to go ahead and ask Elena if we could skip you and come back to you, and if you could close up this particular question. So Ching, you want to hopes, apprehensions, and kind of a call to action here, keeping in mind that our time is, we need all day for, yeah.
Sure. I think just to tag on what Elena was sharing about, like the immigrants feeling like so much resources have been given. And I just wanted to say, I came here 20 some years ago as a graduate student. So I'm a first generation immigrant. When I came, like the US for me is always just a land of opportunities. And I still believe that we are not here to take opportunities. And actually it's really about creating opportunities for everyone together. So some of my colleagues know that I'm also an advocate for computer science education, because I see technology could empower people so much. But at the same time, there's also the other camp of like, is technology taking over our jobs, right? So all that stuff.
Thank you.
To go back to the advocacy, I would really say we need to advocate all groups, right? So we're talking about students of color, underserved, underrepresented. Again, I feel like if we don't, then that's really opportunity lost for us as a society.
Thank you. I know I kind of made that abrupt there for you. Tracy, call to action.
I think two things. I would agree with around equity and representing all kids, but I particularly have an interest, and I see it in my work, is looking at families who are adoptive families or transracial families, and pulling that piece or that thread through identification of gifted or twice exceptional or thrice exceptional kids.
Thank you. Let's see, Rosa, call to action.
Well, I just want to say two things. I think we should hire more teachers of color and as role models for the kids, and hire curriculum coaches who can help the teachers, because the teachers are stretched too thin. They cannot do everything, and this is a challenging group to work with. And counselors, mental health, focus on mental health from diverse counselors, because sometimes it's hard to trust someone who looks very different than you, and you feel like, I don't know, it's hard to build trust sometimes. So that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Elena.
Yeah, I won't really reiterate most of the stuff that I had already shared that was, hugely important to me, and what I am feeling apprehensive about, and also hopeful. But my call to action would just be to the parents to encourage you to advocate for your child, and that can mean something as small as asking your child's teacher to differentiate. And it can be really intimidating, but no matter what your background is, I'm encouraging parents to understand that your children deserve to have access to all the resources that are available to them.
Thank you. And I would just say that I think listening to you really closely, everybody here, like your calls to action are so nicely kind of aligned and woven through all of your responses and answers. And just to say that I think we just got started here. And I know at this group, give us 5 more hours, we're going here. And I just want to, on behalf of myself, the University of Denver, the conference, everybody in attendance, just thank you for everything, your contributions, not just here tonight, but everything you're doing on behalf of your own children, but also other families, because that was another theme that resonated here throughout your answers. And the loudest round of applause that I could possibly generate here for you all. And I see some love coming in here from well-deserved love coming in on the comments. If the slideshow was up right now, the next slide would just simply say thank you. And I think essentially that really says it all at this point. And out of respect for time, up next, this continues. This is the theme of this conference. And in our pre-talk here that we just kind of kicked it off, 5:30 to 7:30, the policy symposium. Another type of panel discussion. I hope everyone's able to attend that. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you for moderating.
Thank you, everyone.